And that really came to a head in the 1966 Democratic nomination battle. McCarthy had won primaries, but Humphrey ended up winning the nomination because he had the support of the high command at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago that year. Consequently, when Humphrey won the nomination, there were literally riots in Grant Park out in front of Chicago, in front of the convention. But the parties were really ideologically heterogeneous at the time. You had conservatives, you had moderates, you had liberals in both parties. Now what you have is there are very few conservative Democrats. The Blue Dog Democratic Caucus is very small compared to what it used to be, which are the moderate and conservative Democrats. Very few moderate and liberal Republicans. There's only 3 Republicans in the entire United States House of Representatives right now who represent congressional districts, for example, that last time around went for Vice President Harris. Contrary-wise, there are only 13 Democrats who represent districts that last time around went for Donald Trump. It used to be that you had a lot of people who would do split-ticket voting. Nowadays, people essentially vote based on Republicans will vote for the conservative candidate, Democrats will vote for the liberal candidate, and there's very little room in the what is a very diminished middle of the political spectrum.
You know, we've been focusing on politics, but Charlie Kirk's assassination, you know, isn't just contained to the political system. We've also seen the impact that this has, you know, including in Hollywood. Jimmy Kimmel's, you know, late night show indefinitely suspended for his remarks about Charlie Kirk, and there's been a lot of debate since all of this unfolded when it comes to the First Amendment and the importance of that. You know, historically, you know, can you share a little bit more in terms of the dialogue that is happening about the First Amendment because of what we've seen over the past week and a half?
I think both sides are basically pointing fingers at the other side in terms of, I think both sides believe that they have some sort of a monopoly on the First Amendment. I think that when somebody on the left makes a statement that's kind of out of the mainstream, the right will go after it. Contrary-wise, when the right makes a statement like that, when the left makes a statement like that, the left makes right make a statement, the left will certainly go after that. That's why I think you see that, for example, with Jimmy Kimmel's suspension, a lot on the right were immediately saying, you know, but what about Tucker Carlson? So a lot of whataboutism, if you will, right now in American politics about the First Amendment. You also hear oftentimes the term with Charlie Kirk that he was a First Amendment absolutist. I think when you look at the Constitution, though, most Supreme Court justices do not interpret the First Amendment in terms of absolute language. They put the word reasonable in there. For example, there are time, place, and manner restrictions. What does that mean? You can't go out at 3 o'clock in the morning in a residential neighborhood and start yelling and screaming, although if you took the amendment literally, then you should be able to have complete free speech under every possible circumstance. So very few people are absolutely free speech absolutists, but it's very similar to other amendments. The Second Amendment, for example, most people believe that somebody who has extreme mental impairment should not be able to buy firearms, yet most people, I think, on both sides favor at least some semblance of there being a Second Amendment. The Fourth Amendment's a little bit different because the Fourth Amendment literally says unreasonable searches and seizures. That's a word that's very much a relative word. What exactly does unreasonable mean? But the First Amendment really, I think that most people do not take it literally, but most people will, I think, point to the other side and say that, you know, you're kind of you've said something that's out of kilter, therefore you should be fired. So the cancel culture really kind of works both ways, and I really don't know how you kind of ameliorate it and come to some sort of a middle ground here.
And Charlie Kirk was, as you mentioned, an enormous advocate for the First Amendment, right? You know, and so much conversation is happening right now, you know, uncomfortable perhaps for some, but, you know, essential, you know, as we continue taking a live look here in Glendale, Arizona. You know, Rich, before we let you go, in terms of the historical significance of this event, has a sitting president and many of his cabinet members, have they ever attended a memorial service such as this, and President Trump also slated to speak at this service?
Yeah, I think there certainly are examples. I think that Robert F. Kennedy's funeral, for example, I think that most of the many members of the Johnson administration, including the president himself, certainly attended that. And that was somebody who was obviously a United States Senator from New York. But you do have this from time to time. There was a Secret Service agent that died in the Oklahoma City bombing, for example. I know that Bill Clinton attended the funeral for him. But this just really shows, I think, how much support Charlie Kirk has, particularly amongst young conservatives, that you could literally fill up a stadium in Arizona with potentially 63,000 plus people in one setting, plus a laundry list of members of the Trump administration. It really shows that the Republican Party is really Charlie Kirk's, it's Donald Trump's. It's really no longer George W. Bush or Dick Cheney's Republican Party.
All right, Rich Rubino, we appreciate you as always joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And another live look right here outside State Farm Stadium. As you can see that this sign says major event at stadium, anticipated delays as tens of thousands of people are expected to attend Charlie Kirk's memorial service. We are going to have extensive coverage throughout the day. Our special in-depth coverage begins at noon Eastern time with Live Now from Fox's Josh Breslow. Meanwhile, continuing reaction and responses continue to pour in. And I wanted to share this right here from Scott Turner, Secretary Turner right here, saying, quote, "Today we lay to rest Charlie Kirk, an American hero whose death is not just an attack on a man of faith, but an attack on the ideals that founded this country. This atrocity was the fruit of a toxic philosophy that stands against everything Charlie believed. It is a philosophy that assumes that any opposing viewpoint, no matter how reasonable or politely expressed, is, quote, hate speech that must be met not with debate, but with bullets. It must end." And I did want to share some brief remarks from Secretary Turner right now.
On September 10th, heaven echoed with the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant," as Charlie Kirk was taken up to glory. But though his passing has made heaven richer, it's left the world poorer. We mourn Charlie's monstrous murder at the hands of a deranged, evil assassin. The Apostle Paul tells us to weep with those who weep, and we weep now with Charlie's widow and his 2 orphan children. The trauma they suffered is unthinkable and can't be put into words. We pray for God to comfort them and love them in the midst of this desolation. Charlie's passing leaves behind scars on the soul of our nation, but it also leaves a